everybody. So I'm making this video in reply to the video where I say that, or it's titled, I regret buying an automatic Z06. So that video got a lot of, the likes and dislikes were about even, but for a video on YouTube, it was a lot of dislikes. And I think that's because the majority of people clicking on it were people who were more fans of a manual transmission. So I thought in this video I'd tell you guys the truth as to why I ended up going with the automatic Z06 versus the manual and how I came to that final decision. So in the comments section in that video, I'll start off by saying there's a lot of people saying that it's probably because I don't know how to drive a manual transmission. And that's not the case at all. I actually do know how to drive a manual. I took my driver's license test on a manual transmission, and to be honest, that's the first car I drove was a manual. As well as I had to drive manual cars for work and whatnot. Back when I had the shop, my truck was manual, which I used to order groceries with and go pick them up, and that was just a real pain in traffic. And I know in that video where I say I regret buying an automatic transmission, I mentioned things like, being able to drink out of a cup and not having to shift in and out of gears during traffic and constantly going in and out of first. But those weren't real issues for me when buying this car, because I honestly didn't plan on driving it enough to where manual transmission or automatic transmission in traffic and being able to do those things that I was just making a joke about in the other video would make a big difference for me. It all came down to actual performance. Now, I said that I do know how to drive a manual transmission, but my experience with performance vehicles, vehicles that are over 500 horsepower in a manual transmission, is very limited. The only cars I've ever driven with really that much power are, my cousin used to have a Viper SRT 2010 model, and I drove that maybe once or twice, and I've driven a ZL1. The one that was actually previous to this new one that's about to come out with the A10 option. So those are as far as performance vehicles go, high-end performance vehicles, those are the two that I drove in a manual transmission, and that was my experience with performance vehicles in manual transmission. So when it came to buying this car, I really felt like I didn't have the experience to compete against someone, or to compete against, these new automatics. Now, another really big factor into me buying this car, besides me not being, at least me feeling that myself, that I couldn't compete or, shift even close to what these can shift on, or an automatic transmission can do in a manual, is the fact that I talked about this in an earlier video, but there were two other cars I was considering when buying this car, and both those cars actually are not offered in an automatic transmission, or sorry, in a manual transmission. Both of them come in a DCT, and those two cars were the GTR and the 997 Porsche Turbo. So eventually I took out the GTR from, and that was completely gone, the idea of buying that car, and it was between this car and the Porsche 997. And I drove the Porsche, I really liked it. I didn't get a chance to drive this car, and the Porsche was a PDK, and I really like how that performed. And during that time, I actually had this car on order. So this car was on order, and I had about approximately 6 weeks to make my decision. When I originally had this car on order, I ordered it manual. So when you order cars, you usually have a grace period where you can kind of modify the options that you've selected on the car. So during that grace period of those 6 weeks, I drove the Porsche. I really liked how the PDK performed, and then I met up with some people and I did a lot of research on the automatic transmission. Now, the reason I opted for the manual right away before even considering the automatic was because I heard about the overheating issues with the 2015 model when the Z06 first came out. And I talked to a lot of people, and they told me that it really wasn't such a big issue in California because we had dry heat. And I don't know if you guys watch Vehicle Virgin's channel or see his videos, but he goes up to Sonoma Raceway, and that's where I went and talked to a couple people. And actually the guy with the GTR was one of the people I spoke to. He was in that video that Vehicle Virgin's uploaded. And there was another guy who actually owns a Z06 and tracks it up there. And he had no overheating issues, and both of them recommended me getting the automatic. Now, keep in mind, both these guys are seasoned track goers, and they have a lot of experience with cars. And they both said that, basically everything was moving towards automatic or dual clutch transmissions. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, an automatic transmission isn't a dual clutch transmission because it has a torque converter and this and that. And the thing is, we're in 2016. We're not back in 1916. Automatics have been around forever. Torque converters have been around forever. And really the hydraulic fluid and, you know, high performance maneuvering and getting a lag in shifts due to that is something that's been negated with engineering and isn't really apparent in this car. And like I said, really the only issue that was apparent is the overheating. So I spoke to those people, I drove the Porsche, and I just really, really liked the PDK. And this car, I was told, performed very, very similar to that PDK. So those factors kind of pushed me towards getting the automatic, and I was very, very hesitant in doing so because at the time I wanted to spend the extra $3,000 on upgrading to the LZ2 package and keeping that rather than putting the $3,000 into the automatic transmission option for this car. Because as you all know, or if you watch my previous videos, this is a $3,000 option in California. Normally it's just $1,700, but there's a gas guzzler tax on the automatic, which is $1,300 in California. So I ended up going with the automatic. Now, as far as my experience with it and how I like it so far, I think it performs just as well as the PDK and the Porsche 997. And my cousin who has the Porsche 997 says it performs just as well. And he's driven both cars pretty frequently. And I wouldn't say, I've driven the Porsche quite a bit, and I'm hoping to do a review on that for you guys later, but the shifting, there's no real delay on it. And I know that some people have said that there is a delay, but that's not the case at all. And I think it has more to do with the way the paddles work on this car versus other cars. And it almost seems like the paddle will shift just as soon as you barely click it, but you have to depress it completely, and that will actually cause the shift. So those are some things I wanted to mention. Now, as far as the performance and anything I feel that could be improved in this transmission, yeah, there is. And that's the case with any transmission. You know, it's seen with the Gallardo, for example. And I know a lot of you can be like, oh, Gallardo. You know, I don't know how you prefer to say it, but that dual clutch transmission had a lot of issues. And with this being the first iteration of this this transmission, there's some issues where we go from, you know, when you're going from manual mode into drive mode, which is the fully automatic mode, you can still shift in it, by the way. The car does a little bit of odd shifting, and it almost gives you like that, kind of like someone shifting into a low gear too early, you know, going from like second into first. And it does that sometimes from time to time. Really, that's the only issue I've had with this transmission. I haven't had the overheating, and I haven't had the chance to push the car to the point where I think I'll get overheating. And personally, I don't think I'll be doing fast enough track times to where I'm going to be getting overheating in the ambient temperatures that I'll be running this car at. So those are some things I just wanted to mention, and I wanted to put out there for anyone who's interested in buying the car. And you know, just to tell you guys why I really ended up going with the automatic transmission. It had nothing to do with traffic. It had nothing to do with you know, like not having to put my hand on the stick shift. It was more like it was definitely just a performance thing. And I don't know if you guys have read articles and whatnot, but even professional drivers, like I said, I definitely don't consider myself anywhere near professional. You know, they average 300 revs lower when driving the manual versus driving the automatic in this car. And that's just because this car is shifting so often in the automatic, and the computer is just, you know, trying to maintain maximum torque. So, like I said, those were the issues, and I felt that I wasn't, you know, for me, getting the automatic was the better option. Now, for other people, you know, you may go with the manual, and maybe some people really do feel like the performance in the manual is better, but, you know, on paper, and hopefully we'll see what the time comes out with the Nürburgring, which they just ran. I don't know if you guys heard, but they finally reopened the Nürburgring for 2016. To car manufacturers due to the restrictions on speed in that one section. But like I said, those were the reasons that I ended up going with this, like I said. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully that gives you guys a real idea as to why I got the transmission. And if you do go with the manual or whatever, And if I had gone with the manual, it would have been more of the novelty of it, factor of that, and the fact that, you know, I just wanted that feeling of driving a manual versus the performance aspect. So hopefully you guys found the video helpful and useful. So, and if you guys did, comment, subscribe, and like. And see you guys next week. I don't know if you know that you're like the first one that you hit the button. I had to let go because honestly, I think he did, but I think the water's a little scared to press it, you know?